Hey everyone, my name is Alex Smith, and this is my presentation for my research assignment number 1 for CSC 309. The topic of my research assignment is From Loot Boxes to Battle Passes, the Ethical Shift in Digital Microtransactions. What we're going to cover today is going to be how the video game developers have changed their monetization approaches when it comes to video games to extract more profit out of players, and how there could be some ethical problems with how that's been done. So the topics we're going to cover are the issue of the traditional monetization, how video games have typically been monetized. We're going to cover new monetization approaches. We're going to cover the ethics of so-called loot boxes and some of the issues with them regarding, let's say, digital gambling and other issues that are related to them. And then we're going to go over an ethical alternative that I believe is the best approach as a result of the issues that have arisen out of the controversy surrounding loot boxes. So let's talk a little bit about the traditional monetization and player leveling process, right? So traditionally, back when video games first came out, you would purchase the base game, and then once you had the base game, you would just play the game and enjoy. There wasn't really anything more you pay for it. Once you bought it, that was pretty much it. The only way you get more out of the game from the developer would be if they release something called an expansion pack, which would be a large pack of content, big enough that it would require like its own DVD and box and things like that, right? You could buy one of those, you get a lot more content out of your game, but that was pretty much it for a while until there was an entirely new game release. Over time, as internet connections became more prominent and people had better connections, companies started using things called downloadable content, which is DLC. So DLC would allow developers to create content that would quickly be available, and people could just go online and say, hey, I want this, purchase it, download it, and play with it. Other things have also been added for monetization, such as advertisements. There's a lot of crossing over of different genres and different types of markets when it comes to video games and other platforms. But by and large, it's still the video game itself and its associated content that gets the most monetization. Well, one of the biggest examples of this, and one thing that has always stuck for many, many years as far as the traditional model has been Blizzard Entertainment's World of Warcraft, which to this day is still a standard subscription-based format. You go, you buy a base video game, you subscribe to it per month, you play it. If you want new items, you just simply play the game and unlock it over time. And most players have really come to expect that. If you want to unlock, all the cool-looking items, the skins, the weapons, and everything else, you simply buy the game, you play the game, and as you get better at it, you play and you complete different challenges, you'll unlock more content. Well, over time, video game developers have realized that there's a decreased profit potential in something like this. So, you release this base game, and then you get that $60 out of the player initially, but then you don't get anything else out of them. That's the only thing you get out of that player until they go in and make the effort to say, hey, I want to buy this DLC pack, or I want to buy this expansion pack. But it's not a very quick, regular thing. It's not like going to the gas station and getting a couple items. It's a large investment initially, and then players didn't necessarily have a lot of ways of getting smaller amounts of monetization into the process, right? So they had to think of ways to come up with something to monetize the platform a little bit better. So introducing now the so-called loot boxes. One of the first, they've been around for many years, really in different game formats, but one of the most prominent initial appearances of these loot boxes was in Electronic Arts' Mass Effect 3. So people realized when they brought this game that in one of the components, I believe it was the multiplayer, that you could buy, instead of just playing the game and unlocking new weapons and skins and stuff like that, you could actually buy a box. And inside the box was items that you could use to benefit you in the game, new weapons and things like that, right? So they realized, well, hey, what is this? What is this loot box? What is this box? This crate thing we can purchase? It's a different concept, right? It's something that people had some curiosity about. So that was one of the initial things with Mass Effect 3. But over time, this concept grew and it became into the idea of a loot box. So what do I mean by loot box? Well, a loot box is something that it's an in-game item of sorts that once you purchase it or acquire it, when you open it up, it presents the player with a randomized assortment of items. So you don't necessarily know what's in the box. You might know that there might be really good or just kind of okay stuff in there based on the price of the box, but it's called a loot box because you don't know what loot you will get when you open it. So as this idea grew and became more common in games, it became quite a familiar and standardized way of monetizing the video game platform. According to a research paper done by Zindel, Meyer, and Baloo at PLOS1, 71% of video games on the super popular PC gaming Steam platform, 71% of these games contain loot boxes today. That is how popular this concept has become. So basically, these companies will go and say, hey, for $2, $4, $10, you can purchase a box, and that box will have a random chance of having a certain category tier of items in it that you may want. So the player goes, hey, okay, all right, so I'll fork over $2, you buy the box, you open it up, oh, hey, there's something I really, really wanted. Or, because it's randomized, you might buy the box, open it up, and say, I already have these items, or I don't really want those items. So then maybe you might go buy another item, another loot box instead, and the process goes on and on and on. Basically, gives people just as random, kind of like a Pokemon back in the day. You don't necessarily know what you're going to get when you buy the item, right? So this the profit potential in this has grown tremendously. According to Statista.com, since 2017, the income derived from loot boxes and skins and extra, DLC type content has grown from $30 billion to $50 billion in the space of just a few years. So there's obviously a lot of profit potential in something like this, right? So, but the issue that you start to think about is how much of this is simply a shortcut for players to say, hey, I don't necessarily want to grind forever and ever and ever and get all these different items. I would just like to, skip the line a little bit, and get these items that I want, just on chance by spending money on these loot boxes. So how much of this is a shortcut versus how much of this is a necessity for players and or the developers, right? So let's go over a little bit over the initial loot box controversy. So again, the main issue with loot boxes that we're going to talk about is the kind of the slippery slope, right? So loot boxes offer a randomized offering, so you can't just say, oh, I know it's in the box, so I'm going to spend $250 for it and get these items that I want. You don't know. It's a loot box. It's randomized. So this is a little bit different from the traditional model, even the newer DLC model, where you knew exactly what you're getting before you bought it. So one of the time that this really came to the head, like I said, loot boxes have grown and grown and grown over time. Well, all of a sudden in 2017, EA, the same company that released Mass Effect 3, EA released Star Wars Battlefront 2, very, very much anticipated game at the time. Well, players quickly started to realize just before the game was released, according to Business Insider and StreamTech.com, that there was a pay-to-win, a PTW component to the game in the form of loot boxes. So before Battlefront 2, if you bought a loot box, it was just randomized items. Hey, cool stuff you can put on your characters, different weapons, things like that. Well, in Battlefront 2, that was not the case. In Battlefront 2, these items that you could get from loot boxes gave you a huge advantage inside the game. You could give the ability to fly, invincibility for a short period of time, all kinds of things like that traditionally were never included in a loot box. Not only that, but according to the same sources I just mentioned, the EA had increased the traditional leveling format so much that it could have taken up to 40 hours to unlock just a standard character in the game. So 40 hours is a long time to play a video game, very long time, and just for one character, that kind of makes the whole traditional leveling format just seem just horrible by comparison, right? Who wants to grind for 40 hours when you could just have a chance to unlock a box and get all the stuff out of it? So the whole system basically rewarded players for buying the loot box. It took them away from the traditional leveling format and said, hey, just buy the box and you'll be able to unlock everything you possibly want. So it rewards the play to win format versus just normal player progression, which is an issue, to say the least, right? So according to Business Insider, EA had a very rough time with this. There was a lot of public outcry. They even had to come out and say, hey, we're sorry, we won't do this again. We didn't realize it was such an issue. We're not going to do this. We're going to pull everything back. So they removed their in-game currency. They removed the loot box format. They stripped all this stuff out of the game and redid a whole bunch of stuff just because of how fierce the public outcry was. So let's talk about another issue with loot boxes. Just beyond just the irritation of having to go and buy something versus just being able to play the game normally, right? So let's go cover the issue of loot box in general. Are they ethical at all? Let's cover two of the things we know about loot boxes, right? The first thing is that compared to like DLC expansions, those things are known content. You know what you're getting before you buy it. Whereas with loot boxes, everything is randomized. So there's a chance, right? There's a chance involved with the item before you actually open up. So you put your money towards something you don't just not know. So with that, since there is a chance and you may not get what you want the first time, there's going to be a temptation to make multiple transactions. So what does this sound like to you? This sounds a little bit maybe like gambling. And according to the University of British Columbia in 2019, in one of their journals, this is very similar to gambling. In fact, there were many of the same crossovers were many of the elements of gambling were associated with loot boxes, because you get on you play a video game, and maybe the video game doesn't cost you, maybe it's a free video game, but then you have these loot boxes, so you're dropping large amounts of currency on these items that give you these chances. And since you don't know what percentage of chance it is that you'll actually get something good, you might be tempted to spend multiple amounts of money to get the items that you want. And maybe with the you might be willing to spend more on more of the rare loot boxes, because they have a even higher chance of getting even better items. So it kind of goes on that way, a little bit of a cascading issue, and it goes back to that slippery slope I was talking about. Perhaps the video game developers could reduce the chance you get something good out of it, and thus make you more likely to buy something else. But without the knowledge as a player, without the knowledge of what that chance is, you're kind of like working from a blind spot. And this whole combination of events is what was the conclusion of a journal article in PLOS 1 by Zindel and Cairns, in which loot boxes were the issue of loot boxes was compared to problem gambling. So problem gamblers, they have that. It's not so much what they get out of it. It's that addictive, that feeling of just, maybe I'll get something better next time. Maybe I'll get something better next time. And the same issues we're seeing, according to their research, the same issues we're seeing in loot boxes, which is obviously a tremendous issue, a tremendous ethical issue. So you have a combination of not knowing what you're getting before you buy it, a unknown randomized chance of getting something you need, the issues of getting something that would be an advantage over players just doing a regular progression system, and then the temptation to make players buy repeated amounts of boxes. These are all tremendous ethical issues with something like loot boxes. So let's go a little bit over the reaction to loot boxes and how that's occurred. As I said before, there was a terrible public reaction to Star Wars Battlefront 2. So much so they had to completely change their video game, basically. In 2018, just a year after that, according to BBC, Belgium banned loot boxes outright. They are not allowed to be used in video games in Belgium because they recognize them as a type of gambling. And especially with a lot of games being targeted towards minors, obviously that was something that wasn't appropriate. In the United States, according to BBC, some legislation has been attempting to try to work at loot boxes, but there have been some public figures that have spoken out against them as well. Hawaii State Representative Chris Lee spoke out against loot boxes. Specifically, he called them online casinos, which, if you think about it, is a pretty accurate term, especially for a child, as if you have access to, your parents' credit card or something like that. It is an online casino. You don't know what you're getting out of it. You may get something great, something terrible, but you don't know your chances, so you're just buying something because you think you might get something good. And there's that temptation, of course, to keep going with it and keep trying better things. So what's the ethical alternative to loot boxes if that's an unethical or a format? Well, there are definitely certain alternatives, but one of the best ones that has come out in recent times has been something called a battle pass. So a battle pass is a seasonal offering, according to The Verge and deconstructorfun.com, which cover video game news and information. The battle pass is a system where you buy, let's say for $10, you buy a seasonal pass, and then within that pass, you play the game normally in a traditional system, and you unlock all the items that you get. And you automatically know exactly what you're getting because you purchase the pass, you see every item, but you don't unlock it until you play the game. So it's a great combination of seasonal enjoyment and playing a new content, but it rewards traditional playing of the video game. There's no repeated transaction, there's no gambling associations. So this new format has become so popular that it is now the cornerstone of the system used in Call of Duty Modern Warfare and in Fortnite, which are both incredibly popular video games, especially Fortnite, which is very popular among minors. So the Battle Pass, of course, is a very, it's a very ethical alternative. As I said before, it has none of the negative effects of loot boxes, and it kind of returns that traditional format while also giving video game developers a way of being able to ethically monetize their platform. So in conclusion, we will see new forms of monetization appearing over time, maybe in response to loot boxes and things like that, maybe something different than Battle Pass. But one thing is clear, that we do have to be on the lookout for these types of things, because in a world where monetization is key, it is all too easy for video game developers to exploit video game users in the future. So thank you for watching my presentation. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.